Welcome to Parenting Unpacked, a place for parents to seek refuge with evidence, empathy, and common sense. Hosted by Dr. Siobhan Kennedy-Costantini and Dr. Kristyn Sommer. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to Parenting Unpacked. You're here with your hosts, Dr. Kristyn Sommer and
Dr. Siobhan Kennedy-Costantini.
Woohoo! So on today's episode, we're going to chat to Siobhan all about how she got to where she is now and what made her choose early childhood development. But before that, we're going to just chat about some other stuff because, you know, we really want to talk about something on this podcast that we keep stopping ourselves from talking about so we can talk about it with you guys.
We keep talking about when we're not recording, so we just decided, no, get the good stuff recorded.
Get the conversations where we debate current parenting things because we have slightly different perspectives that end up converging anyways. We decided we're just going to
we think we disagree and then it turns out we're just saying the same thing in different ways.
Yeah, which I think is a lot of parenting. And people like on TikTok, people constantly have these debates in my comments. And like I can't read all the comments, but I occasionally catch a debate going on and I'm just like, you guys are saying the same thing. Why are you yelling at each other?
It's like you want to be a mom to be like, hi, shh, you agree, now be friends.
Yes. I occasionally drop in my comments and do that. But anyways, moving on away from being a TikTok mom and onto something that did happen on TikTok recently. And that was a video I made about a parenting class that I went to. And I know the irony that we're on a parenting podcast and I went to a parenting class. But like, hey, I want to keep expanding my knowledge. I want to see what other people are doing. And this one was actually something that my daughter's daycare educators did. So I wanted to make sure that their practices were in line with what I do in my platforms and with my own child. So I went to this parenting class and it was amazing. She was talking all gentle parenting. She had a bunch of Brene Brown stuff. She was a school counselor. It was rad. But one thing stuck out that made me really uncomfortable. And she used the phrase, praise is poison. And this, I know where this comes from. So in Montessori and gentle parenting, there's this kind of ideology that you shouldn't just tell your kid good job or good work and you shouldn't praise them. But people take it way out of context and they're just like, I'm never going to say a good thing to my kid again. It's like, no, don't do that. Please don't do that.
Did she expand on this more?
Well, she kind of said, don't say good job, this, and this. And then she had a bunch of reasons why. One of them being that it's a conversation killer. And it is. If you say, great job, it kills the conversation. And you can't be like, how did you do that? Like, that's amazing. This must have taken a really long time. How did you stay there for so long doing this drawing?
He's completely conflated praise is poison, though. That those are not compatible.
You can do both.
Can. This is the real challenge I find with any kind of prescriptive parenting is that it's like X equals bad, Y equals good. And you're like, bullshit, absolute bullshit. Feel free to edit out my swearing magic, Kristyn.
No.
If you want to. I don't mind. Mind you, my child Timo is starting to copy swearing. So we really need to, it's wonderful. But he's not quite old enough to understand when it is and is not appropriate. So we need to put a lid on it for a while, which is challenging because I'm a potty mouth. But all of that aside.
Sorry, guys.
Like it just doesn't, like, where is the space for nuance? Where is the space for subtlety? It's not that I get, and I completely appreciate and understand the need and desperation for quick, easy answers when parents are exhausted and tired and just need someone to tell them what to do. But you're doing them a massive disservice by telling them praise is poison because that's scaring them entirely unnecessarily. Praise is essential. Like as social learning researchers, we know that praise and social validation is essential for our children's well-being.
It's central.
And anyway, I'm very unhappy and unimpressed with this lady's take on things because it's wrong. It's wrong, it's immoral, and it's unethical. Anyway, there I said it.
Well,
I'm outraged.
I'll walk. Usually, I'm the one with the really.
I know. I'm really appreciating
balanced. So this is shocking me. But I will walk it back a bit and say that I think it was the wrong choice of words. And the problem is that she was saying the right idea, but she used the wrong catchphrase. Praise is poison is like I don't know, an alliteration or whatever they call it. And it's really fun, but it's also, that's the thing that's going to stick in people's minds. And they're going to be like, oh, no, praise is poison. Like that's the thing that's going to stick. And that's not the thing that should stick. It is, oh, when I say good job, I should then say, how did you do this? Or what's your favorite part about it? And ask more questions. So when I put that video up on TikTok, I had the most amazing people putting different suggestions in there, and I was like, wow, we're crowdsourcing parenting advice here. Like, and it was so rad because people are like, yeah, like you can say this and then add these questions. And for parents that are like, I don't know what to say then, like if I can't say good job, what hell can I say? And one look in that comment section was just like so many things, and I was amazed. So yeah, I think there's a problem with saying praise is poison. That's a bad choice of words. But the underlying idea that you don't just cut the conversation off, because if you say good job, is your kid really getting that feeling of praise, or are they just getting the whole, yeah, good job, now move on? Like,
exactly. And I mean, this is the case with so many of these things, right? Like, are you saying it just because something needs to be said, or do you mean good job? And there's a big difference between good job and, oh my goodness, good job, look at what you did. The same information is being conveyed, but it's all about the meaning behind it. And there's nothing wrong with saying good job. There's nothing wrong with saying good work, amazing job, wonderful, look, you did it. Those are all brilliant. But exactly like you say, it's about continuing the conversation and not using it as a dismissive praise, move on.
Absolutely. And a lot of people were trying to ask about participation awards and praising effort and things like that. And I think this is probably a good topic for a future podcast. So we're not going to dive any further into it here. But just to say that praise isn't poison. Praise is central to healthy human psychological well-being. Don't scrap it. Praise your children. They're amazing.
Not the wazoo. Praise is wonderful. Just make it genuine and engaging.
And just because it's not amazing to you as a parent doesn't mean that this thing isn't amazing to the child. This is the first time they've done this. They're creating new skills. Like, it is mind-blowing to them that they're now able to do something, and they want to share that joy with you.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's my opinion on praise.
A little hot take
at the moment. Just for now. Now, let's roll into what we're actually talking about in today's episode, and that's all about Siobhan and how you got interested in the world of child development, and how you ended up founding Science Minded. Tell me more.
Yeah, so just to contextualize that a little bit, I run a science communication parent education platform called Science Minded. And like Kristyn, I have a PhD in child development, specifically focusing on children's psychological, emotional, social, cognitive development. So I know child development. Let's just summarize. Yeah, how they learn to do things. And way back when, I always, like Kristyn, was really interested in children. I come from a really big family. I have 4 siblings. I've got 7 nibblings, nieces/nephews. That's my favorite word, nibblings. So good. I have like 20 plus cousins. There's just a lot of us. So I was always surrounded by children and was really intrigued in how they were learning and what they were discovering and how differently they learned, and how one kid could do one thing and another at the same age couldn't. And then on top of that, my mum is a speech pathologist. So I'd have lots of really interesting conversations with her about children's language development. And then alongside, she sees a lot of kids with developmental issues. So whether that's ASD, autism spectrum disorder, or language delays, or Down syndrome, or these kinds of things. So I had a lot of these developmental conversations with my mum because I was interested as a child and as a teen. And then, to be fair, the real clincher was Sixth Sense. So in that movie, the main character, who is played by, I know, right? Who is the guy that played? He's the anyway.
He's very. I'm not that old.
No, as if you're only a few years younger than me. Lazy. No, lazy is not the right word. Whatever. Jumping right along. The actor, famous actor in Sixth Sense, the character is a psychologist, a child psychologist. And I just loved the way he would talk about kids' feelings and perspectives and really give credence to their inner world. So that was kind of like, I didn't know that was a thing. This is really interesting. So like you, I went into it fully anticipating that I would be a clinician. And then I just fell in love with the research. I was good at it. I found it really interesting. And I just decided to follow my feet and take it where it led me. So I was really drawn to all of the developmental subjects. And then I, in my honours year, worked with newborns and parents. And I looked at social learning, early social learning, and how parents and children engaged and interacted and how that kind of shaped their social understanding. And then I worked as a research assistant on a longitudinal project where I followed babies from 1 week old until 18 months. So I saw them 10 times over the first year and a half of their life. So I really got to watch them grow and got to meet and really got to know the families.
So cute.
Yeah, so it was really, really fun and lovely. And then I did my PhD in a very similar field, looking at kind of the functional capacity and background and foundation really for social learning, so specifically imitation. And yeah, was really interested specifically in how the social learning occurs within the context of the mother-child relationship, which set me up really beautifully for the work that I do now, because I'm so interested and motivated to help other parents really understand the role that they can play in their children's lives and how they can really support and facilitate their children's learning. So I did my PhD. I, like Kristyn, was a crazy person and just smashed it all in one go. I did honours, straight on honours to my PhD. Most people take a couple of years break to breathe and live life. I was not that clever. Went straight into it, then finished my PhD, got married, was writing papers on my honeymoon like an idiot. And thankfully I only did it for 3 days before my husband confiscated my computer sensibly. And then I submitted my PhD, and then within I think 3 months I had a job overseas in New Zealand where I worked for 3 years, got pregnant, came home, did some lecturing work in Australia, and then had a baby. And then my world turned upside down because I had a baby with them. And life was very, very, very hard for the first year. And I kind of knew when, like Kristyn said, that she, in her, when she entered her academic role, she realized that this is where she wanted to be. After my job in New Zealand, I realized that whilst I really enjoyed it, I didn't think it was the right place for me. There are lots of different reasons why I didn't feel like academia was a good fit for me, which we can talk about in another episode. But I spent what my maternity leave was. I spent that trying to figure out what comes next. And I'd had lots of conversations with my husband about maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that, included for things like becoming a florist, being a baker, using none of my skills that I'd spent decades trying to figure out. And then he was like, how about you put your training to use? It's like, that is a good idea. So on a bit of a whim, I decided to start my Instagram page, Science Minded, because I was, and I say this all on my website, I was really shocked at how little information that parents were being given was evidence-based. So like this isn't even including all of the stuff that gets shared and talked about in the kind of social space. This was like literally pamphlets and information from health professionals, that the stuff that was coming out of their mouth, I knew for a fact was inaccurate, outdated, or just plain wrong. Yeah. Like, and I remember them they'd say things like, I can't even remember specifics right now, but a great one is, they need to be topped up with formula. And I'd say, why? And they'd say, well, he's not quite on the growth chart. And I said, well, he was 3 days ago, and I don't think that 3 days of being underweight means that I need to completely change things. Now, I have nothing against formula. I have nothing against babies who are combination fed or formula fed. I think it's marvelous that we live in an age where you can provide your child with healthy alternatives to breast milk if you don't want to, if you can't, for all kinds of different reasons. Completely valid. But it didn't make sense. I was very fortunate. I had a great supply. Feeding wasn't a challenge for us. We both were very lucky that it seemed to work out. But yeah, being told that I needed to top up my baby made no sense to me, and I wasn't given good reasons. And I figured if you're going to offer me medical advice, I need some evidence behind it, particularly because so many of the growth charts are based on 1950s babies in the US who are formula fed. And that, again, there's nothing wrong with that, but my baby isn't an American baby. We're not in the 1950s, and he isn't formula fed. So he's going to have a different chart. I was just really, really shocked at how little information was based on research, up-to-date current research. So I thought, bugger this. I know a lot. And even in my mother's groups, people would say, why does my baby need to feed so much at nighttime? I was like, oh, well, breast milk has a hormone known as tryptophan, which is really good at helping them fall asleep. And everyone would be like, what? And I was like, oh.
That's a thing?
I'm like, people don't know this. Of course they don't. And the reason I knew it is because for my PhD, I studied the components of milk. This breastfeeding was a huge part of my PhD dissertation. So I had access to this knowledge that wasn't being widely disseminated to the people who would find it the most beneficial, breastfeeding mothers. So I thought, right, I can do something about this. And in my Instagram, I was getting flooded with so many posts about all kinds of things. I'm like, hey, I know this stuff and I can write about it. And it was a brilliant distraction from what at the time was a really dark and challenging place with my postnatal depression and anxiety. It was an outlet for something that was intellectually stimulating, and I could kind of claw back the old me that got to really think about these things in a critical and interesting way. So yeah, that was the kind of the birth of Science Minded, and now I post 3 times a week on various evidence-based, research-based information, all from basically for kids, for pregnant moms 0 to, and then kids 0 to 5 or 6 is my main area. And I run sensory workshops in Brisbane, and I'm hoping eventually to create virtual ones as well, because there's so many more people that I'd love to connect with. But yeah, that's my little story.
Amazing. Well, that's cool. I will just beat the trolls, because if they're anything like TikTok, tryptophan's not a hormone, it's a amino acid.
Thank you.
But yes, I guess we call it a hormone as a colloquial term because normal people don't really understand amino acid. We probably should call it a chemical instead, but that's fine. I've just been punished for saying the word hormone before.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and on the topic of shit health professionals have said to me that is very wrong, my favorite one is when Sienna was a week old. So my daughter is 2 now, and Siobhan's child is, what is
almost
it,
22 months.
Almost 22 months, yeah. So they're very close together. But when Sienna was a week old, the maternal child health nurse came over, and they always come in to check, and they weigh them and they ask you a bunch of questions. And she was like, okay, how's she sleeping? And I'm like, yeah, good. She'll sleep for 20 minutes at a time. It's all cool. And she'd be like, if she's not sleeping for an hour, you must put her back in the dark, in the quiet. Do not make eye contact, and shake the cot and go shh, 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 and do not let her get up. If she is up before an hour, she is going to be sleep deprived. And I'm just like, I didn't know much about biologically normal infant sleep then. So I was like, whoa, okay. But what I do know about is the fact that mothers' faces and eyes are so incredibly important to infants, especially newborns, because it's all they can see. They have just enough eyesight to see from your breast to your face. because that social engagement calms them, it centers them, it makes them feel safe. So when she said, don't make eye contact, I was like, alarm bells, you have no idea what you're talking about. And I've since now learned that in terms of biologically normal infant sleep, it's very normal for a baby to catnap up until at least 6 months, if not longer. And, you get less naps, in which case they consolidate a little bit more. And then it's still a huge amount of variation. But yeah, in terms of like health professionals and alarm bells, that was my first experience. And there was so many after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've talked about this a lot before, is I come from a place of, I give people the benefit of the doubt, and that's for my own mental health. That's not for them. I assume that people are coming from a good place and from good intentions, because if I didn't, I would be a rage monster and I wouldn't be able to handle it. So I just assume that it's accidental, it's misinformed, that they're trying their best. And if they fight back against me opening the conversation to discuss alternative options, I go, okay, great. Thank you. Goodbye. Because my mental health is too valuable to be eaten away by people who are trying to make me feel bad about doing what feels right for me and my family, which is why that part of my whole everything is that if it's working for you, amazing. If it's working for your child, brilliant. If it's working for your family, I am here for it. Nothing I say or suggest is to make you feel judged or ashamed or that you're doing the wrong thing, because like you say, variation is the key. Everyone is different and you know your child best. So if that's what's working, amazing. Where I kind of struggle is when people are sharing what's working for them and then other people get really defensive because it's an assumption that what works for me means that you're doing it wrong, which isn't the case. Like, there are things that Kristyn and I do really differently, and that's great because we have different children who respond differently. And this happens even within the same family. Like, I'm one of 5 children. Me and my siblings were not parented the same. We weren't even disciplined the same because different things worked for different kids. So my parents had to do what worked, and just like we do what works with our own children, Kristyn and I, and you do what works for your kid, and that's amazing.
What's the one we were talking about the other day that we do differently? We lie. We don't lie.
Oh,
well, that's a thing.
I've been thinking about this so much, and we have to do a whole episode on this because the thing that made Kristyn laugh and laugh and laugh was that I'm like, I love lying. I lie to my kid all the time, and
I don't.
You've lost it.
I can't.
Yeah, but the thing is, I was reflecting on this a lot. I'm like, I actually don't lie. I was just being informative. Because I think it all. I know, it's a problem. I'm a rebel without a cause. But I just rebel against everything, regardless of what I believe is a problem. Anyway, all of that aside, it all comes down to phrasing, right, and language. Because you were saying that you often use "it's not on the menu" to demonstrate or like to explain to Sienna that what she wants isn't available. But then I was thinking about this. Like, I tell Timo, I don't say the park is closed, but I say there are no caramello koalas. And that's a lie, because there are caramello koalas, sometimes in our fridge. But what I'm trying to communicate to him is that he can't have a caramello koala. And in a way, saying there are none is a lie. But I guess what I'm really saying is there are none that are available to you. So that's not a lie. But then similarly, like, and we talked about this when we had the conversation last time about this, about saying it's not on the menu. Technically, it could be on the menu. You're preventing it from being on the menu. So you could view that comment or that phrase as a lie, depending on how you choose to interpret it.
Yeah,
but
it's
basically, exactly. But the way I really think about it is, which is what you talked about, is that, do you feel uncomfortable? Are you deceiving your child? What's the goal of the lie if you are lying? And I think a lot of the time the challenge becomes our children, particularly when they're as young as they are, both kind of 2, they have limited language and limited language understanding. So you have to be very intentional about what you say. So saying things like there are no caramello koalas, in my mind, communicates the same information. It communicates you can't have one. It doesn't really matter to him whether they exist or not. all he knows is I want one, give it to me. And I'm trying to say no. But yeah, anyway, topic for a future podcast. Otherwise, we'll be here all day.
I think the only problem with saying there are none is that one day he's going to be like, well, yeah, there are. And that's the only thing. Like, he's going to have this like follow-up question. Which, like, old school parents would call back talk, but like it's not. It's just a follow-up question.
But in my mind, that's when you change the conversation.
Yeah,
if he's old enough to understand that there are, then that means I need to update my phrasing, because at the moment it makes sense to me anyway. I don't know what makes sense to him. Yay for not understanding what's inside his mind at all time. That makes life hard. But like, it's about being willing to adapt and being willing to pivot and know that one approach doesn't work all the time. Yeah, totally. And the one thing that I think needs to be clarified here is that I'm not on a high horse saying I don't lie to my child, therefore I'm the best parent. I don't lie to my child because I don't lie to anyone. I am not okay breaking rules. And these are social conventions and rules. And this is all a part of like how I'm very neurodivergent. And this is just who I am. I cannot lie. It makes me anxious. It makes me sick. So I don't lie to my child because it makes me sick. It's not that I'm trying to be this holier than thou parent. It's literally that I would feel sick if I lied. And it doesn't matter whether I lie to my child who has no understanding, or my husband, or my boss. It doesn't matter who it is. I can't even jaywalk. If there's a red light, like if I'm at a like pedestrian crossing and there is a red light, I cannot walk across it. That's amazing.
And if there's a pedestrian crossing within view, I cannot walk across the road at another point. I have to go to the pedestrian crossing, or I feel incredibly uncomfortable. Like, it's a compulsion for you, basically? I have to adhere to societal rules in a really big way. What if you don't? I get really uncomfortable. But what's the follow-up? I for a long time I dwell on it and get anxious about it. You just fixate on. Is there the expectation that there will be a punishment from society? Like, is there? There is no expectation. It is an internal model of behavior that I am violating. Yeah. And it's, if you think about, so the therapy I do is acceptance and commitment therapy, right? And it's all in line with what your core values are. And one of my core values is adhering explicitly to social norms. And if I violate social norms or societal rules, I am out of alignment with my core values. And when I'm out of alignment with my core values, my anxiety flares. And it's just who I am. So, yeah. What about a situation where the rule is there, but you believe the rule to be wrong? Now we're infringing on I know. Sorry, I'm getting into the grey. But say yes. I'm trying to think of a good example. No, bed sharing. Obviously, bed sharing is my example. Perfect. That's a great example. So yes, society, our society, to be more explicit, it says bed sharing is wrong, co-sleeping is wrong, and more importantly, dangerous. I know for a fact that you co-sleep and bed share, and that you happily do so safely. Was that a huge struggle for you? That was a really big struggle, and I was in a very dangerous situation with my child leading up to that because of this really strict societal norm around bed sharing and how health professionals treat it and stuff like that. And the fact that there was very little information out there about how to do it safely. The only saving grace for me was that I did a breastfeeding course. And in that breastfeeding course, they introduced me to the Safe Sleep 7. And I did this when I was pregnant. And I was like, that's so irresponsible that they're telling them to bed share. How dare they? And that completely changed my perspective. I'm now very thankful that they had the forethought, because it wasn't this abstinence only kind of education that you should just never do it. It was this, it might happen. You might have to mitigate the risk that you're experiencing right now. And this is the way to do it safely. And so when I did it really safely. I was very strict with all of the rules. Because, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to adhere to all the rules. But yeah, it was a really, it was I was already in the middle of extreme postnatal anxiety. So it was just adding to that as well. So
I think that experience is true for so many people. So many people I've spoken to about their postnatal depression and anxiety. A lot of things. I mean, sleep is a huge factor and trigger for so many people for lots of very obvious reasons. But yeah, co-sleeping and bed sharing is a huge factor when it comes to that. And I, like you, a huge part of my parenting is harm minimization, harm reduction, because living life is risky. Having young children, and I mean, we both have highly spirited, but in terms of my child is very risk motivated. He loves risk. He loves climbing. He loves jumping. He loves playing with scissors. He loves sharp objects.
So does Sienna.
Yep. So
they're dangerous.
The thing is, like, he's going to do it whether I let him or not. So I've learned that I can either teach him how to do things safely, try to minimize the risks, or I can spend my day going, no, which won't do anything except make me stressed.
Absolutely.
And the same is true when it comes to co-sleeping.
Your child rebellious.
Yeah.
Sorry, and it'll make your child more rebellious. The more you tell them no, the more they rebel. Like,
and then he'll just be like me, and he'll be jaywalking left, right, and center. Kidding. I definitely jaywalk. I'm cool with jaywalking. But
I'm not okay with it. Lord. We're very different people, even though we're very similar.
It's the best. I was this is me being ridiculous. I was going to say sometimes I jaywalk. No, I don't. It's practical jaywalking. No.
Yes. Anyways.
Yes.
I'm going to make us stop talking now.
Sensible.
So on the ending on the topic of postnatal anxiety and depression, that's very convenient because I'm sure that's what our next episode is going to be next week. Is it, Siobhan?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. I mean, obviously that's something we've both grappled with. And I mean, because our children are so similar in age, we both seem to have, we were in it at the same time, but I remember we didn't tell each other for a long time, partly because we were exhausted and just trying to function. But I think
I had no idea. You know?
No, correct. I didn't have the language for it for such a long time. I knew things were shit, but that was pretty much it. And but then, like, similarly, we seem to have had a pretty similar recovery as well. Like, we both seem to have kind of come into our stride at similar times as well. So I think that would be a great topic to take on.
Cool. All right. Well, that's happening next week. And to finish off this episode, we're going to do magic moments and meltdown moments. Siobhan, which one do you have for us first?
Let's go with our meltdown moment. I think probably the best one, and unfortunately it's a very consistent one throughout my life. I get into I have lots of euphemisms for anxiety, which, you know, should say a lot considering I've always had these euphemisms, but I've never identified having anxiety for, like, I've always used these words, but never, but only recently identified that I've had anxiety my whole life without realizing it. Same. I get into tizzes or spitzes or flurries every time I clean, and it's hard to know what the chicken the egg is in this situation, whether I'm anxious and so I clean, or whether cleaning makes me anxious. I think it's the former. But my husband was going to clean the house on the weekend, but Timo is in daddy mode, so he wasn't allowed to leave his site. So they went down to the shops to play while I cleaned the house, because as the mother of a toddler, you know that you can't have a toddler in the house and clean the house. That is a ridiculous idea. So I cleaned the house top to bottom, and then felt very wonderful because everything was clean and wonderful and lovely and nice and together as much as it can be. And then I met up with him at the shops, and I was in the worst mood. I was just in a foul mood. And Alex was like, "Why are you so grumpy?" I'm like, "I don't know, because I cleaned." And he's like, "That should make you feel good." I'm like, duh. Anyway, so I was just in a terrible mood, got caught up in it. Thankfully, because I'm in a much better space emotionally, was able to kind of acknowledge and, like, not follow the spiral of full meltdown. But I was meltdown adjacent.
Living for that. Meltdown adjacent. That's a great phrase. So my meltdown moment, actually, let's start with my magic moment, because they kind of lead into each other. Like, I like to do things in pairs. I'm very anal, so doing things in pairs works really well for me. So my magic moment was that my husband discovered the magic that is giving your child decision fatigue. So if you don't know what decision fatigue is,
that's great.
So if you don't know what decision fatigue is, that's where you ask your child to make decisions on really inconsequential little things. And you ask them so many decisions that when you really need them to do something, they'll just do it because they're just like, oh, I'm so exhausted. Like, you just take control of my life. Because as we know, toddlers want control. Like, so yeah, decision fatigue is my favorite parenting hack. And it's taken me a little while to model it for my husband because I never just tell my husband how to parent. Like, I'm not that kind of mum. So I do something. And occasionally I'll explain why I do it if he's like, why are you doing that? But yeah, I just kind of model it. And he's just like suddenly had this light bulb moment where he's like, oh, so this is how we get her to get dressed in the morning. Because like he used to be like, okay, do you want to get dressed? And she'd just run away and he wouldn't be able to get her dressed for half an hour. And then like I'd just come in and I'd be like, do you want the pineapple pants or your overalls for kindy today? Do you want the white shirt or the black shirt? And she'll just choose them. And then I'll be like, okay, now do you want to put them on yourself or do you want me to put it on for you? If you're not going to get it on in the next 5 seconds by yourself, I'm going to take over. And all these little like things mean that like she gets ready in like 3 minutes instead of half an hour that it takes my husband. And usually if my husband was doing it without the decision fatigue, she'd be screaming the whole time because like she's like, no, I don't want to get dressed. But yeah, when it came to like doing it this morning, like it was magic. It just happened. Everything happened seamlessly. And when we needed her to get into the car, it was just like, all right, let's go. Like she's like, Kindy, let's go. And it was just magic. But my meltdown moment is that occasionally it just still doesn't work. And she'll lose her brain and not want to get dressed for Kindy. So
that was my follow-up question with like pineapple pants versus whatever the other color pants were. What my kid always just goes, cool, I don't care what you want, I want these pants. Which are usually dirty. Yeah. He which again, like, I mean, that's how I know he's my child. He's like, great, I've seen your 2 options and I reject them both. That's very true to my personality as well. So look, with swings and roundabouts, it all comes back to bite you. Yeah.
Yeah. Decision fatigue is great, but it doesn't work for all things. And it won't work all the time.
No, absolutely. And we use that strategy too, like this or this or this. And the follow-up of, right, you have 3 seconds. For some reason, 3 seconds works for us. Maybe because I'm an impatient person.
I never actually count though. Do you
count?
No, I don't count. Yeah.
No.
I just say the number.
Totally. And they don't necessarily know what the numbers are. And better still, they don't know seconds. It's great.
Yes. They really don't. And like, she does it instantly. As soon as I say that, I'm like, if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. And she's like, doing, and like jumps up and does it.
Again, amazing. Timo goes, cool, I'm doing what I'm doing.
I'm living for how different our kids are. So yeah, moral of this story is parenting tactics don't work the same for the same kind of people. You know, we have different kids, but like also similar kids. They're very similar.
They are, yeah. They're intense. They're intense little ones. Which, you know, isn't all that surprising considering we have our moments too.
Moments? We are also.
Look, I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to be kind.
You are going to learn this as you listen to us that we are very intense people. If you haven't already learned that from our social platforms. But anyways, I mean, Siobhan, your social platform's super balanced and calm. Like when you jump on your stories, you're like, da da da.
I think as well, like part of, I talked about this in my little background, but I have worked with, in my PhD and all my research positions, I've worked with thousands and thousands of parents and seeing just like the real common denominator with all of them is how much they love their children, how much they want to do right by them, and how desperate they are to make their lives happy and healthy and all these kinds of things. So almost always parents want to do the best and they just need empathy and someone to put a hand on their shoulder and be like, you're doing a good job, this is hard. So that's what it always comes back to, like realizing that lots of the time people are coming from a place of frustration and confusion and feeling overwhelmed, and they just need some direction and some support.
So all I really want you to know is that Siobhan is not as calm as her social media makes her out
Certainly
to be.
Not. Certainly not. I'm crazy.
Yeah, we're very crazy. You have to be crazy to do the amount of things that we do. We're not sane. But anyways, we haven't had your magic moment yet, and that's going to finish this episode.
Brilliant. My magic moment. So we live on a main road, 4-lane traffic, and they were doing, it's not fun. Mind you, we do have lots of emergency vehicles go by, which used to, actually, maybe this is my magic moment. It's a very long-ranging one, but for me, auditory information has always been a trigger of anxiety for me. Before children, it was very easy to manage. You just stayed away from the noise. But then when you birth something that creates a lot of noise all the time, and they have health issues and they're screaming constantly day and night, it's pretty hard to get away from that noise without being put in jail for abandoning your child. So I struggled desperately with the crying and the noise, and then also at the same time we lived in a different place that was also in between two main roads, so the sirens and the cars and the motorbikes were just huge triggers for me as well, because they woke up the sleeping baby, which then made him cry. Anyway, it's a vicious cycle, which we'll talk about in much more detail next week. But the magic moment is that my child is obsessed with transport and vehicles, and he loves emergency vehicles. He calls them wee-was, for the siren, wee-wah. Yeah. So, and because we live on a main road, they go by all the time. And so he loses his mind with excitement. He hyperventilates, going, and we have to sprint. Yeah, we sprint to the front door and out the front gate. It doesn't matter what we're doing, eating breakfast, watching TV, having a bath. We wrap towels around us and run out the front door to look at the ambulances and the fire trucks go by. And the great thing about it is that it's turned what has been a huge anxiety trigger for me into like a real lovely like place of excitement and happiness. So he conditioned me to both hate sirens but now love sirens.
And that is the perfect analogy for parenthood, if I've ever heard it. Amazing. Well, that's it for this week. We'll catch you next week for postnatal anxiety and depression chats, and undoubtedly more random stuff that has to do with child development, because we aren't very good at focusing on one thing.
No.
So yeah, we'll see you then. Bye.